Hi there, and welcome back to How to Write Science Fiction That Doesn't Suck. I'm Rick Partlow, author of the Drop Trooper series, and it's almost Christmas. So for those who celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas to you, to everyone else. Happy Hanukkah, Happy Ramadan, whatever you celebrate. Happy Yule if you're a Viking, and here's to you. I hope you're having a good holiday. Hope you can be with your family. I am here in lovely white Wyoming with a white Christmas. Here, see if I can show you. Not sure if this is going to pick that up, but yeah, there it is. You can see the snow outside. So it's a wonderful white Christmas for us here. I have my children here. Well, they are home. They are here for the holidays. They're not here right now. I'm alone right now. My wife's at work. My kids went skiing, borrowed my truck, so I'm stuck at home. So I thought I would record one last video before my end of the year in review video. And it's been kind of cabin feverish for me. I've been taking a break. I finished a book about a little over a week ago, and I've just been gradually outlining, maybe writing 1,000 words a day in the outline, not stressing myself, just relaxing. It's been easy to not go do anything because a couple of days ago it was negative 31 here, which is nuts. But now today it's in the low to mid 20s, and I actually took a 5-mile walk without having to dress up like I was doing an EVA from the space shuttle. So I wanted to talk to you today about originality. I hear a lot of people, especially beginner writers, talking about originality. Whether they have an original plot for their debut novel, whether their ideas are original enough, whether their setting is original enough, it all has very much to do with the ideas behind the novel, the setting, the background, the world building. And I've heard a lot about it, and I don't want to say set the record straight, because I am by no means the final arbiter of what's true and what's not. But I want to clarify things about originality. First of all, let me disabuse you of the notion that any idea you have, no matter how out there it sounds, is truly original. It may be something you've never heard before. That does not make it original. There have been billions upon billions of people alive since the invention of writing. And any idea you write about will have likely been written about by somebody else at some time or another. So don't feel like you're going to be able to come up with an original idea. What you should come up with is an interesting idea, not necessarily original. Okay, but how interesting? How out there do you want to go with your ideas? I mean, as an example, I would say look at the work of trad published conventional mainstream sci-fi writers like Stephen Baxter or Greg Bear. Both incredible writers, both highly successful, both award-winning writers, both hard science fiction writers. And they are well known for coming up with ideas that are pretty far out there. I can't remember they had things like, I think it was Stephen Baxter had the Photino birds, which were these beings that lived in the hearts of suns, and pretty much their universes are full of aliens whose thinking and the way that their brains work, the way that their minds work, are just incredibly beyond what humans can perceive. And the cultures that they're dealing with, even humanity, are, well, far ahead of ours by thousands of years. So these are deep dives into a world that is so totally unlike ours that it's now I'm going to say this, and I don't want to make this for criticism of either writer because they're incredible writers. They're award-winning. They're well known as being great writers, but a lot of those ideas are so far beyond our experience that they kind of are off-putting for me. I have a hard time immersing myself in that universe because I have a hard time latching on to a character I can identify with. But that's, they still were highly successful. So the fact that I can't identify with them is no criticism of them. That's just my personal, preferences. But what it does say is a difference between trad published mainstream literary science fiction and indie science fiction. And now I want to explain to you why this matters and why I'm kind of veering off the course of craft to go into the business end. And that's only because in this case, the craft and the business end mesh together. Because if you write with the aim of becoming traditionally published by one of the big 5 or 4, whatever it is now, as a science fiction writer, you are going to write a different book than if you're trying to be an indie genre science fiction writer. And by genre, I don't just mean the genre of science fiction. I mean genres like space opera, military science fiction, post-apocalyptic, that sort of thing. Because there's one thing that you have to worry about that trad published authors don't, and that is the tropes. Now, the trope sounds mercenary and, I guess, unimaginative and something that you want to avoid being tropey. But if you want to make a living as a genre science fiction writer, as an indie or with a small press, tropes are going to be important to you. And I'll explain why. It's all about who makes the decision to give you money for your book. If you are self-publishing via Kindle, KDP, the ones who make the decision to give you money are the readers. If you're publishing through a small press, which is most likely going to publish your books via KDP and on Kindle Unlimited in this genre, then they are looking for the readers to make that decision. If you are trying to get trad published, the person you need to convince to buy your book is the editor. The editor will be the one the chief editor, whatever house you're going with, will be the one that decides whether they're going to give you money for your book. And before you even get to them, you have to deal with agents who think they know what these editors want. And sometimes they do know. So what the trad pub editors and the trad pub houses want out of the books that you submit to them is very, very different than what the average reader wants on KU and buying indie books on Amazon. Let me give you an example. I've used this before. I don't think I've used it in this series, but I've used it in interviews. Come about the late 90s, early 2000s, trad houses began to want something different. They wanted originality. If you submitted something to an agent or directly to a publisher, there had to be some sort of hook, some sort of idea that was original, that was different, that would catch their eye and make them say, this isn't like other stuff. They decided they did not want your typical Tolkien-esque medieval European fantasy with heroes in armor and elves and orcs and dwarves and dragons. It had to be something slightly different. There had to be some hook. It had to be an Asian-centered fantasy, or Central American, or it had to have an orc as the hero. It had to have something different, because it wasn't that the readers were tired of reading traditional medieval European fantasies a la Tolkien. It was that the editors were tired of reading them. And the editors decided that their tastes were mirrored by the fantasy authors. At the same time, science fiction editors decided that people didn't want, unless your name was John Ringo, people didn't want space marines in combat, battle armor. Unless your name was David Weber, people didn't want heroic Horatio Hornblower style maverick star captains out there, saving the galaxy. They wanted something original. They wanted something different. They wanted a new spin. And they still do. And it's even more complicated now. I won't go into why, but there's a lot of politics involved in this. And not just politics like Republican or Democrat. I'm talking politics like internal politics of the publishing industry. There's a lot of internecine, interwoven lines going through this that are very much a result of being in a New York City bubble and getting your opinion of what the readers want from the New York Times bestseller list. But if you look at indie writing, if you look at the people who make money, who make the big money in indie writing, they're giving people Starship Troopers with a new name. They're giving people Horatio Hornblower in space. They're giving people Tolkien-esque fantasy. They're giving people this, and they're making money because there's still a whole bunch of readers who want to read that. They never got tired of reading about, heroes with magic swords fighting dragons, or space marines in battle armor fighting aliens, or heroic star captains blasting it out with enemy ships. They never got tired of reading that. People just stopped publishing it. And when the indie revolution happened and people got Kindles and started reading ebooks, and there was suddenly hundreds of thousands of new books and tens of thousands of new writers out there, the people who wrote that stuff made money. Now, that's not to say that you can't put your spin on the heroic fantasy, or the heroic star captain, or the space marine. You can put spin on that. You can make characters that are unforgettable. One that was trad published, John Steakley's Armor, put his own spin on Starship Troopers. Now that's a book that's a little earlier. It's like early 80s. So it's really before this movement away from those kind of traditional plot lines happened in trad publishing. But it was a new spin on Starship Troopers, and a wildly successful and popular book. So and if you look at like Richard Fox's Terran Armored Brigade, I think it is. I'm sorry, I have no brain fart, but it was his own spin on Starship Troopers. So they're doing something fresh. They're making fresh characters in fresh settings, but they're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're not trying to say, we know what's good for you to read, and we're going to write something new that is different than what you read before because we think that's what you should read. They're writing books that people want to read. So originality, if you are writing for trad publishing, originality is your friend. If you're writing for indie publishing, originality may not be your friend because people want to read those plots. And writing something truly original, like a genre bending or genre blending thing, like a weird western, something like that, it's harder to market. And I'm not a marketing expert, but I know it's harder to market those uh, through long experience. And you're going to find yourself with the best book that no one ever read. So, and let me say, I've not been trad published. Whether I ever am trad published is up in the air. I've talked to a publisher who seemed interested, but these things drag out glacially slow, and I'm not, as they say, holding my breath. So I'm not going to come to you and say you can't get trad published writing, you know, Tolkien-esque fantasy or Heinlein-esque Starship Troopers style Space Marines. What I am saying is that even if you write a good book, a really good book in that vein, it's going to be harder to get the attention of most editors. And let's not. And when I say writing for trad publishing, you can, you can aim to get trad published, but the actual reality is it's not easy. It's not a straightforward affair where you just submit this book and then a few months later you hear, oh, I have a contract. No, they get so many submissions. Some places only accept submissions from agents. Some will read them off of a slush pile. But getting an agent is just as hard almost as getting trad published right now because most of the really big name agents aren't even accepting new clients. And if you go with a new agent who doesn't have that kind of reputation, you're taking a risk they will not be able to get you published, and you've wasted years of your life. Which is why I'm mostly addressing this one to people who are aiming to be published by a small press like Athon or Variant or any of the number of small presses out there that do fantasy and science fiction, or who are going to self-publish. I'll be honest with you, it's where the money is right now. You can make money self-publishing even if you're not. I went into this before. If you're not a top-tier writer, if you know how to write books to meet the needs of readers, then you can make money at self-publishing. And this is going to get a little deep into the field, deep into the weeds here, but the key to making money in genre publishing, in self-publishing or small press, is not to try to aim at this huge audience. Now, there are books out there that snag huge audiences. Terry Maggart and Jeff Chaney's Backyard Starship, incredibly successful, incredibly. And there's a couple of other writers who jumped in that bandwagon within a month or two of that book coming out, and they write so fast that they had basically imitations of that plot line that they were marketing and getting in on that action. But unless you can identify like the next big thing that's rising way up to the top of the charts, and then you can write really fast and get in the action, that's not how you're going to do it. You're not going to be able to hit a wide audience that way, particularly in something like military science fiction. The aim for writing in a genre like military science fiction is to get a small but loyal group of fans who will buy everything you write. Doesn't have to be many. It could be, 10,000 people. It could be 5,000 people. You can make a living off of 5,000 people who will buy everything you write. If you write quickly enough. But the way to get a loyal group of fans is to give them what they're looking for. I'm not going to be vain about this. I don't consider this an insult to myself, but what I write is the comfort food of genre literature. It's the fried chicken and mashed potatoes. And maybe that's not hot cuisine, but people love eating it and they'll go back to it over and over again. And I'm a big fried chicken fan, and um, thankfully there is a grocery store here in Powell, Wyoming that has good fried chicken at their deli. Because after we left Lakeland, Florida, I was like, what am I going to do without Publix fried chicken? Thankfully, there's somebody that has some. Because there's not even a KFC within 2 hours drive here. So I love fried chicken, and I am very happy that I can still get some once in a while. But yeah, that's what this is, comfort food. This is people looking for the same thing done just slightly different. It's Space Marines in battle armor. It's stalwart maverick captains fighting the enemy in their battleships. It's, in fantasy, it's warriors with magic swords and elves with bows and dwarves with their big hammer, fighting dragons and orcs. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing wrong with what other people might call unoriginal settings, unoriginal plot lines. What needs to be original, what needs to be you, is the voice. It's the characters. You need to make characters who grab people, who bring them in and bring them back, where they want to read more about these characters. They want these characters to have more adventures. And that's kind of challenging in itself because you're writing more adventures for these characters and you want to stay within certain guidelines, but you have to be creative inside those guidelines. It's like your creativity isn't being obliterated. Your creativity is being forced into a mold. And you can be just as creative as you want to be inside that mold, as long as you don't go outside those lines. It's like a lot of directors complain that, say, the Marvel movies steal their creativity and force them to stay within this mold. Well, yeah, but people want to watch those movies. They make billions of dollars. So people want to read these books. They make millions of dollars. They have hundreds of thousands of readers out there. And they have devoted readers who will read anything that is inside those guidelines. And if it's crap, they'll like, but they aren't going to stop reading it. They're going to keep trying to find somebody who writes stuff that's not crap. And that's where you come in. Write stuff that's in these guidelines, in this mold, that's not crap. You can write a book like Grimm's War by my friend Jeff Haskell, which is a stalwart starship captain going out to save the galaxy from the enemy, and you can make it original and have characters that grab people and make them care about them. You can have Contact Front drop troopers with Cam Alvarez, which is battle armor and Space Marines and fighting the enemy and dropping out of ships from orbit. And you can write characters that people are so interested in that they keep coming back. And I'm writing book 12 in Drop Trooper, and people keep reading it. It's given me a career. So if you consider yourself an artiste type who has to be original, who has to come up with an idea like, out there like Greg Bear or Stephen Baxter, or you want to write the next Dune, well, you can try to be a trad published writer if you get lucky enough and are able to write a pitch well enough to get an agent and then get a publisher. But the odds of that are very small. It's like saying I'm going to become a trad published author is kind of like saying I'm going to win the lottery. I mean, the odds aren't that bad, but it's like saying that. It's like saying I'm going to keep playing until I win the lottery. Well, maybe you will, but the odds are you won't. So if you want to try to get trad published, that's fine. Nobody's saying you shouldn't try. But if your aim is to make a career as a writer, you're going to have much better chance of actually doing that going with a small press or publishing it yourself. Indie publishing will also tell you much more quickly whether you're any good or not, because people will let you know if you're not any good. You can find out exactly where you have to work on, what you have to accomplish. Okay. So originality is important inside of its own confines. If you're writing genre fiction, which you are, or else you wouldn't be listening to this, then originality is not as important as compelling characters. Compelling characters, maybe with a twist that's a little bit different from the usual character. And you don't want to write a carbon copy of Starship Troopers or John Ringo's A Hymn Before Battle or David Weber's, On Basilisk Station. But you want to write something that echoes that rhymes with those, and with your own characters and your own voice and your own story. And if the plot and world building isn't totally unlike all those other ones, well, that's fine, because people are looking for those worlds. People are looking for situations like that. They're looking for heroes. They're looking for compelling characters that they can involve themselves with and that can break their heart or be happy and pump their fist when they do well. That's what they're looking for. They don't care that you're writing about yet another federation or galactic empire. They don't care. They won't care if you make your galactic empire the most unique thing that's ever been written. They just want a good story in a familiar setting with characters that they can get involved with. So don't obsess over originality. Don't sit there for years trying to come up with just the right government or just the right star drive or just the right historical background that's going to be totally different than everybody else. That's not the kind of originality you need. It's not what you need to make a career writing science fiction, particularly not military science fiction. You need to work on character building. You need to work on writing that's well-paced, that draws you in, that gets people involved. And all that other stuff, you can basically take any science fiction universe and rip the labels off and put your own label on it, as long as the characters are you, as long as the voice is yours, as long as the whatever conflict is in them is compelling. So this may be a controversial take. I've never claimed to be an artist. I just want to be a storyteller. And the best storytellers, their stories all have common themes. So that is all I'm going to do for today. I'm going to record at least one more video, like a year in review video and maybe New Year's resolutions before the end of the year. And I hope you guys have a good holiday. I will talk to you next time. If you want to get a hold of me, it's dutyhonorplanet487@gmail.com. Thanks.